Many items have been added into Skyblock, some good, some bad, others just completely useless. In today's video, I'll be going over these useless items and explaining why you should never buy or use them. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. We're getting really close to 4,000 subscribers and it would mean a lot if you did. Also, head on over to my Discord. It's a great way to get to know me better and I occasionally play dungeons with the server. The link is in the description. See you there. Have you ever wondered if there's a way to avoid death in Skyblock? Besides more health or defense, there's an item that does exactly this, but it's not what you think. The Saving Grace is an item that'll warp you back to your island when you get below 0 health. Keep in mind that you'll need it in your inventory to work, but as you know, this can be a bit buggy. All in all, it sounds like a useful ability, but let me tell you now, it's not. Not only does this item get consumed on use, it has a chance not to save the player, which completely defeats the purpose of the item. The fact that the Saving Grace costs 30,000 coins to craft makes it even worse, as there are more affordable and effective alternatives like the piggy bank. It can also be a real pain in dungeons because it will warp you out when you're close to death. This will definitely annoy your teammates, and I wouldn't expect a reparty invite. As of now, there isn't much use for the Saving Grace, which is why it's one of the most useless items in Skyblock. You've probably heard me go on about how teleportation tools are very essential. Well, believe it or not, I've found a bow that you can actually teleport with. Kinda weird, right? This bow is called the Ender Bow, and it's crafted using 12 enchanted ender pearls with 3 string. The reason I say this bow is useless is because it deals practically no DPS. Also, about the teleport ability, yeah, that has a cooldown of 45 seconds and it's pretty much the same as just throwing an ender pearl by hand. The only difference is that when you land, you'll damage all the mobs around you in an 8 block radius for 10% of their health. But wait, you can use this for dungeons for bosses, right? Well, that would be a little overpowered, so the damage cap is set to 1000. Honestly, I think the ability is kinda cool, but useless at the same time. If you're planning to buy an ender bow, think again, as there are much more affordable bows that deal much higher DPS like the artisanal bow. In the early days of Skyblock, the 50 million coin Midas sword was one of the best weapons as it dealt the most damage. Since then, so many new weapons have been added into the game, completely outclassing the once popular golden sword. It is auctioned off at the Dark Auction, which is essentially the auction house but for rich players. The more you pay for the Midas sword, the better it becomes. This is because of its greed ability, which caps out at 50 million coins and provides an additional 120 base damage and strength. The reason why Midas' sword has become so unpopular and useless is that dungeon swords like the Livid Dagger deal more DPS for a much cheaper price. Its damage is also similar to that of the Aspect of the Dragons, which only costs 1 million coins. Despite all of these negative things, Midas' sword has a reforge which can only be applied to itself. I'm talking about the Gilded Reforge, which upon killing an enemy, you have a rare chance to grant coins to a player around you. As you can see by this table, the chances are quite low, but you can make a Jujunon's day by gifting them 50 million coins. Unless you can buy Midas' sword for a very good price, it's not worth getting as cheaper alternatives provide much better damage and overall stats. Now onto the pet that has a drop chance of 1 in 10 million. That's almost as rare as getting a good party in the Party Finder. Anyway, this pet is called the Phoenix and it drops from any mob whether on an island or in a dungeon. The epic variant has a 1 in 1 million drop chance, whereas the legendary has a 1 in 10 million chance. I'll be focusing on the legendary variant because it has 2 more perks than the epic. As you can see, the first 2 perks are already quite useless. Hardly anyone will equip the pet for 2 seconds of immunity and a tiny bit of strength. You may as well just use Bonzo's mask. It's for sure not worth the additional stats you miss out on by using another damage or defense pet like the Ender Dragon or Blue Whale. The second perk can only really be used on mobs that you can't one-tap, as it damages the mobs after your 4th melee hit. The third perk, Magic Bird, allows the user to fly on their private island. This ability has been completely crushed, as Booster Cookies and Mystical Mushroom Soups offer very similar perks. They also don't require a specific pet to be equipped. Finally, Eternal Coins, an ability which saves all coins on death. I'm not sure how many times I've mentioned this, but there are so many cheaper and more effective ways to avoid losing money when dying. The Booster Cookie yet again takes out the Phoenix, along with the Piggy Bank close behind. Almost every perk that the Phoenix pet gives is offered by another item which makes the Phoenix pet completely useless besides the RNG flex. Dungeons is very well known for how hard it can be, which is why you'd need some good enchants. You'd probably get low quite a few times, which is why regeneration is very essential. The only 2 regeneration enchants that are able to be applied to your armor are Rejuvenate and Respite. You can't add them both to the same armor piece. The main difference is that Rejuvenate heals during combat, whereas Respite does not. The only time you really need healing is when you're in combat, right? Well, that's why Respite is so useless. It only gets worse because Respite costs more than 3 times as much as Rejuvenate, but only gives an extra 3% natural regen per level. Try to think of a time when you need healing while you're in combat. I can think of tons. Now try and think of times you'd need to heal when you're out of combat. Hard, right? All these reasons and more are why you should not use Respite on your armor because it's mostly useless compared to Rejuvenate. Speaking of comparisons, you've probably heard of Bonzo's mask, but have you ever heard of the Spirit Mask? The Spirit Mask is obtained from the Dark Auction and it usually costs around 1 million coins on the auction house. Its ability is to save the wearer from death and provide immunity as well as plus 50 speed for 3 seconds. This all comes with a 30-second cooldown. The only problem with this is that 3 seconds of immunity isn't really enough to heal up to max health, therefore rendering this helmet useless. The Bonzo Mask's ability is similar, but instead fully replenishes the wearer's health and gives immunity along with strength for 3 seconds. The cooldown is by default 6 minutes, but it and the strength buff scales by your catacombs level. Immunity for 3 seconds without healing is quite useless. This is why you'll never see a pro dungeon player using a Spirit Mask, it'll always be Bonzo's mask. Another well-known item that has completely lost its worth is the Boomerang. This bone boomerang, once thrown, can pierce up to 10 mobs and deals double damage on the way back. The Boomerang used to be an overpowered weapon for Archer class in dungeons, but due to the sword swap nerf, they essentially became useless. The reason for this is that the meta was to throw multiple Boomerangs to deal tons of DPS to mobs. The sword swap patch prevented the ability to throw multiple bones as they wouldn't deal as much damage once thrown. Don't get me wrong, bones are still decent for single use and endstone protectors, but the multiple bone meta and worth completely died after the patches were implemented. The rise and fall of the Boomerang led to panic selling and their prices have been down in the dirt ever since. You can imagine how people on Iron Man or with max bones felt. Yeah, they wouldn't have had a good day. So if you're planning to buy Boomerangs for dungeons, only get one or don't get any at all. They aren't worth it, as for a little bit more coins, you can buy a Juju shortbow which deals so much more damage and it's much easier to use. Usually items that are seen as overpowered get nerfed as the admins try their best to balance the game. Balancing items hasn't always gone well, which has made quite a few items pretty useless, one of which being the Crown of Greed. This golden helmet is dug up from Griffin burrows with an epic or legendary Griffin pet during Diana's mythological event. It provides the wearer a plus 25 base damage boost. The problem is that the crown costs 100 times the weapon's base damage in coins out of a player's purse, which you can imagine isn't very cheap, especially for weapons like a one-for-all giant sword. Say if the sword had 1500 base damage, times that by 100 and 150,000 coins is what you'll pay for every hit. The sad part about the crown is that it used to only cost 1 times the weapon's base damage. This made it a popular helmet for dragon fights paired with the elegant tuxedo set. Once the admins noticed how good of an item could be so cheap, the crown was nerfed into the ground and is now known as one of the most useless items in the game. If you were wondering, why can't I just have 0 coins in my purse, then I wouldn't be able to take any out? Unfortunately, this doesn't work as the helmet can't take coins and therefore won't provide a damage buff. Unless you plan to help Hypixel's economy by taking thousands of coins out of your purse per hit, I definitely wouldn't suggest that you use the Crown of Greed. Overall, useless items are often forgotten and never used. Some are even mocked because of how bad they've been nerfed. Hopefully in the 1.0 update, all the useless items will be rebalanced and given a purpose. That's all for today's video. If you did enjoy, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Don't forget to join my Discord. Thanks for watching. See ya!